Henry Tolliver fought for this country for 28 years. But now a racist HOA president named Karen Whitmore is trying to force him out of his own home. Using sneaky rules and hidden agendas, she waged a silent war against a black veteran. What happened next will shock you and expose a disturbing truth they didn't want anyone to see. Watch closely. This story changes everything. Before we dive deeper into this shocking story, drop a comment, letting us know where you're watching from. And if you're into gripping stories like this one, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an update. It was a Wednesday morning when Henry Tolliver found the bright pink notice nailed to his front porch. Violation notice! Final warning. Unauthorized modifications. Subject to forced removal. Stonebrook Estates, OA. The rustle of the paper in the breeze was drowned out by the sound of a lawnmower across the street. Karen Whitmore, the HOA president, stood with her arms folded beside her manicured hedges, sunglasses reflecting Henry's porch. She didn't smile. She never did. Henry didn't blink. He just reached up, gently pulled the notice down and folded it with military precision. Behind him, the American flag he'd mounted on a newly painted pole fluttered in the wind, the same flag he'd bled for. Let me take you back. 5 months earlier, arrival. Henry Tolliver moved into 42 Willow Grove Lane on a quiet March morning, carrying just 3 suitcases and a folded-up recliner. The house was modest, a one-story with cracked shutters and sun-faded siding, but it was his, paid in full with his military pension and decades of quiet saving. A peaceful retreat after 28 years in the U.S. Army, most recently as a logistics officer. The neighborhood, Stonebrook Estates, was a middle-class suburb in Georgia. Neat lawns, SUVs in driveways, porch swings. But to Henry, it all looked a little too polished. As if everyone had gotten a script on how to behave. And Henry? He wasn't part of that script. The first person to greet him was Miguel, the mailman. "You're the new guy on the block, huh?" Miguel smiled as he handed Henry a stack of mail. "They're real particular around here. Don't let 'em scare you off." Henry had just smiled. They'll get used to me, or not. The first infraction. 2 weeks later, Henry was cited for having non-regulation exterior paint on his mailbox. It was black. So were the mailboxes of 3 other homes on the block. But those homes belonged to white families. Henry's? He got a $75 fine. He appealed. Calmly. Wrote a letter. Never got a response. The next week, the HOA left a second notice. Yard not maintained to community standards. Henry had cut his grass 2 days before. Still, he bought a new mower, just to be sure. Then came the dog complaints. "I don't even own a dog," he told the HOA rep who knocked on his door one Sunday morning. "Well, someone heard barking, and your house backs up to the woods. Maybe a stray is using your porch," the woman said with a tight smile. Henry said nothing, just nodded and closed the door slowly. From his kitchen window, he watched Karen Whitmore walk by later that day, whispering to a neighbor and laughing. Subtle battles. The war wasn't loud. It came in the form of ignored emails, notes left on his trash bins, side-eyes during HOA meetings, and always, Karen, her pearl earrings, her clipboard, her artificial smile. Henry never raised his voice, never made a scene. He showed up, paid his dues, and kept his yard cleaner than anyone else on the block. He'd seen it all before, in deployments overseas, in small southern towns he'd passed through. He knew exactly what this was. "You're too proud," Miguel had said one day while handing Henry a package. They're used to people folding. Henry looked at the package in his hands, a box of American flag brackets. "I've folded a flag for a grieving mother. That's the only folding I'll ever do." The final straw came when Henry installed a flagpole on his porch. It wasn't flashy, just sturdy, upright. The stars and stripes flowing clean in the Georgia breeze. The next morning, another notice. Unauthorized structural addition, immediate removal required. Henry didn't take it down. A week later, he received a certified letter. Due to repeated violations and non-compliance, the HOA has begun formal proceedings for property seizure per community guidelines. Seizure. He laughed, not because it was funny, but because he knew this wasn't about bylaw. It was about control. It was about race. It was about a woman who didn't want a black man, even a decorated veteran, defying her curated community image. The quiet plan. Henry didn't call a lawyer. Not yet. He went for a walk instead, past the neighbors who averted their eyes, past Karen, who stood on her front steps sipping from a wine glass at 10 a.m. Then he walked up to Miguel. "You know what time you deliver on the 15th? Miguel blinked. "Same as always, around 11. "Why?" Henry smiled. "I need you to witness something." On the morning of June 15th, the HOA held a private meeting in the community centre, closed to non-board members. Henry wasn't invited, but from across the street, leaning against his truck with folded arms, Miguel watched Karen exit the building and walk over to Henry's house with a folded notice in hand and a camera crew beside her. Whatever she was planning, it wasn't subtle anymore. Miguel pulled out his phone and hit record. Karen Whitmore didn't knock when she stepped onto Henry's porch. She didn't need to. The camera crew behind her was from the local HOA's Community Compliance Committee. A young woman with a bob haircut and an awkward smile held a DSLR already recording. Another man carried a clipboard and kept glancing nervously at Henry's front door like he hoped no one would answer. But Henry answered. Slow, calm, like he always was. He opened the door with his back straight, eyes clear, and said nothing. Karen didn't wait for permission. "Mr. Tolliver," she announced, "per Section 7C of the Stonebrook Estates Community Standards, you are now being served with official documentation of enforced removal proceedings. We are filming this for transparency purposes." Henry's eyes dropped briefly to the paper she held out, crisp, stapled and trembling slightly in her manicured hand. "Transparency," he echoed. "You mean like the last 3 violations that weren't posted for anyone else?" The camera kept rolling. Karen smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You've repeatedly ignored community standards. You were warned. This is not personal, it's procedural." "Sure it is." Miguel, standing quietly across the street, zoomed in on his phone as Henry reached out, took the paper, and read it without speaking. His hands didn't shake, his face didn't twitch, but his silence had a weight to it, heavy enough that the clipboard man behind Karen shifted his feet. "This isn't your property anymore, Mr. Tolliver. Effective July 1st, Karen added. "You think I don't know what this is?" Henry looked up slowly, eyes locking onto hers. "I've seen insurgents with more subtlety than you." Karen blinked, but the smile came back fast. "You can take that up with the board." "I will." He closed the door gently. Not a slam, just a quiet refusal. Inside Henry's house later that day, Henry sat at the small dining table, surrounded by boxes he hadn't unpacked yet. On the wall was a single-framed photo, him in uniform, standing beside a younger man with the same jawline and darker skin, his son, Marcus, killed in Afghanistan. Henry's reason for keeping going. He unfolded the paper again. Repeated violations, failure to comply, commencement of Article 7C, temporary property seizure for non-compliance. Temporary, but still seizure. Henry exhaled deeply. The chair creaked beneath him as he leaned back, eyes scanning every word like a man checking coordinates. There was a clause near the bottom, appeal allowed if evidence of bias, misconduct, or selective enforcement is provided. Evidence. That word echoed in his mind. Outside, the wind shifted. The flag on the pole fluttered again. Across the street, Miguel's apartment. Miguel plugged in his phone and began backing up the video footage onto his laptop. He watched the confrontation again, frame by frame. He saw how Karen's eyes flicked to the camera before she spoke. He saw how the clipboard guy flinched when Henry stepped closer, as if expecting something more, angry. But Henry wasn't angry. He was steady. Miguel frowned. He'd seen this before, back when he worked part-time at a courthouse before the mail route, how rules could be twisted into weapons. He clicked send and forwarded the clip to Henry. Then he typed, "You're not crazy. They're targeting you. Let me know if you need me." The next night, HOA board meeting. The community centre lights buzzed faintly overhead. Karen sat at the head of the long table, flanked by 4 other board members, all white, all wearing polite discomfort like a second skin. She pulled out a folder labelled Tolliver and spread out photos. His mailbox, his porch, the flagpole. Any other resident would have been fined, removed and quieted by now. "He's ignoring our authority," she said. One board member, Eric Bentley, raised a hand. "Look, I'm all for keeping the neighbourhood tidy, but we're seizing his house? That feels extreme." Karen didn't blink. "If we don't enforce rules, what's the point of having them? He's combative, disrespectful, and frankly, he makes the neighbours uncomfortable." A quiet hush fell over the room. Eric swallowed hard. Is it really about the rules, or is it about him? Karen turned sharply toward him. If you're uncomfortable with this process, Eric, you're welcome to resign your seat. Another board member, a woman in a lavender sweater, spoke up. Let's just make sure the vote is documented. That way, we're covered. Karen smiled. Already done. 2 days later, Henry's living room. The knock came again. This time it wasn't Karen. It was a young woman with short curly hair, a leather satchel over her shoulder. She looked like someone who didn't live in Stonebrook. Mr. Tolliver? She asked. Henry nodded. I'm Ava Delaney. I work with a group that handles cases involving HOA abuse. Your mailman forwarded me the footage. Henry let her in. They sat and Ava pulled out her laptop, playing back the footage Miguel had captured. This, she said, pausing on Karen's smug expression, is not procedural, it's personal, and possibly illegal. Henry's face remained unreadable. So what's the play? You file a motion to delay the seizure while we gather evidence of discrimination. But to win, we need more than this video. We need to show a pattern, proof that others broke the rules and weren't punished. Henry leaned back. I've been watching, he said. There's a man 2 streets over, flagpole too. No violation. There's a woman with a lavender-painted mailbox. No citation, and the kid down the block, he left his trash bins out for 3 days. Not a word. Ava's eyes lit up. Can you get me pictures? Henry stood. I already did. That weekend, Karen received a letter on HOA letterhead, but it hadn't come from her office. Inside was a photo. Her husband's pickup truck, parked for 3 days on the lawn during their daughter's birthday party. No citation, no warning, no notice. Just a sticky note attached to the photo. We all have patterns, Karen. Some just get exposed. Her hands trembled as she looked out her window. Across the street, Henry sat on his porch, calm, silent. But this time, he was watching her. Karen slammed the curtains shut. Her breath was uneven, quick, like she'd just come in from a run. But she'd been standing still, just watching him watch her. She dropped the photo on the kitchen table and stared at the sticky note again. Her husband's muddy tire tracks clearly visible in the image. No timestamp, no watermark, just evidence, undeniable and intimate. The note stuck to it like a whisper that turned into a threat. Her husband Doug walked in from the garage, wiping his hands on a rag. What's up? He asked. Karen didn't look at him. Did you leave your truck on the lawn during Emma's party? Doug blinked. What? Yeah, just that weekend. Why? Karen slid the photo toward him. He stared at it. His jaw clenched. Where'd this come from? She didn't answer. Instead, she picked up the envelope it came in. No return address. Just her name in neat all-caps handwriting. Doug set the photo down carefully, like it might burn through the table. You sure you want to keep poking this guy? He asked, his voice low. Karen's eyes narrowed. He's trying to threaten me. Or he's warning you, Doug muttered. There's a difference. Across the neighborhood, Henry stood in the attic of his house, boxes scattered around him like ghosts of another life, each one labeled with the meticulous care of a man who'd lived under strict order. Marcus, grade school, Afghanistan letters, VA records. He pulled down an old cardboard box marked HOA 2008 to 2012. Dust coated the top like it hadn't been touched in a decade. Inside, meeting minutes, old newsletters, copies of complaints, all from the previous neighborhood Henry had lived in. A different place. But the same game. One paper in particular made him pause. A typewritten complaint, unsigned, about a Mr. T in violation of yard appearance, flagpole unsanctioned, dated exactly 2 weeks before a mysterious noise complaint that led to a fine, and then a lien. And then, just like here, a threat of seizure. That neighborhood had been in Georgia. He'd left before the fight got worse. But he remembered the name on the letterhead. Karen Whitmore, Secretary, Greenfield HOA. Henry sat down hard. She'd done this before. Ava Delaney adjusted her scarf as she stepped into the Stonebrook County Records office. The place smelled like dust and coffee, and the woman behind the front desk was more interested in her sandwich than the people in line. Ava gave her a warm smile. I'm looking for any public meeting records on HOA board votes in Stonebrook Estates, specifically anything with the name Whitmore attached. The woman chewed slowly. That's private property management, not a government function. But the enforcement orders get filed through county code enforcement, Ava replied gently, which means your office stores them. The woman paused, then sighed, sliding her sandwich to the side. "Gonna take a minute." 30 minutes later, Ava stood with a stack of printed documents. Most were boring: tree pruning fines, mailbox violations, garage sales without permits. But one thing kept repeating: Karen Whitmore. Violation initiated, fine escalated, property lien proposed. In 4 years, 6 black homeowners had been fined into forced sales or removals, all signed by Karen. The others? Warnings, delays, excuses, a pattern. Just like Henry said. Meanwhile, Miguel stood on his mail route, debating. He looked down at the small manila envelope in his bag. It wasn't addressed to him. It was addressed to Karen Whitmore, confidential, urgent. No return address, just a red stamp, internal HOA communication. He hadn't seen who dropped it in. But the handwriting on the front? It looked familiar. Too familiar. He glanced over his shoulder and made a decision. That envelope wasn't going to Karen, it was going to Ava. Back in Henry's attic, he set the old complaint letter beside the new one from Stonebrook. Same language, same veiled accusations, and the same name. He closed his eyes for a long moment, then slowly, deliberately, pulled out an old recorder, military issue. He hadn't used it in years, but the batteries were fresh. He clicked it on. "If something happens to me," he began, voice steady, "this is not a coincidence. The woman now trying to remove me from my home did the same thing to me once before, and I have the paperwork to prove it." He placed the recorder on the table, taped the letters beside it, then locked them away in a fireproof box beneath the floorboard. Karen stood in her driveway later that afternoon, watching the street as if something might sneak up on her. The other board members were quiet now. Eric had stopped returning her calls. Marla, the one in the lavender sweater, sent her a nervous text saying she was reconsidering her position. It felt like something was tightening around her. She walked into her garage and keyed in the lock code for her HOA files. Inside, she kept everything: photos, citations, letters. She flipped through the folders until she found Tolliver. She stopped cold. There was a photo missing, the one of the flagpole and the copy of his violation letter. Gone. Her hands began to tremble. She slammed the drawer shut. Behind her, the garage door creaked slightly. She turned quickly. No one there, but she could have sworn. No, she was being paranoid. Still, she double-checked the locks. Ava sat in her car with Miguel that night, the manila envelope in her hands. She opened it. Inside, a typed agenda from a recent unofficial HOA meeting. It wasn't listed in public records. On the agenda, discuss removal timeline of Tolliver. Enforcement methods accelerate. Ensure no paper trail leads back to board. Miguel looked sick. This was real? They're actually plotting behind closed doors? Ava nodded slowly. And this proves intent. This isn't about rules anymore. It never was. She looked out the window toward Henry's house. We're taking this public. The next morning, Henry opened his door to find a newspaper lying perfectly centered on his welcome mat. Not unusual. What was unusual was the single red line drawn through the headline. No note, no signature. Just a thin line of red ink across the words, "Decorated veteran faces eviction amidst HOA dispute." He picked it up slowly, scanning the street. Empty. Then he saw it. His flagpole. Bent. Not knocked down, not destroyed. Just bent. As if someone was warning him, you won the battle. But the war isn't over. The bent flagpole stood like a wounded soldier in Henry's front yard. Leaning slightly, jagged at the base, the metal bruised but not broken. Henry stood still, arms crossed. No emotion on his face. Just quiet, measured breath, like a man who'd seen worse and knew when to wait. He crouched to the base, fingers brushing the fresh scrape in the concrete. Someone had done this in the night. Not to remove it. Not to destroy it. Just to make a point. A warning. From inside the house, his son Marcus stepped onto the porch, still in pajamas. "Did it fall?" he asked, rubbing his eyes. Henry shook his head. "No, son." Marcus came closer. His eyes widened at the bend. "Did someone do that on purpose?" Henry didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked toward the row of homes across the street. Blinds flickered, curtains moved, quiet eyes watching from safe places. "I need you to get dressed," Henry said. "We're going into town." Ava stood outside the newsroom of the Stonebrook Chronicle, gripping the manila envelope like a lifeline. Inside, the place buzzed with keyboard taps and phone calls. A faint smell of burnt coffee lingered in the air. The editor, Mike Ellison, didn't even look up when she approached his desk. We already ran the piece, he muttered, flipping through pages. HOA dispute veteran, got good clicks, we're done. Ava dropped the envelope on his desk. Then you missed the story. He looked up slowly. She opened the folder, spread out the documents, the secret agenda, the violation records, the complaint patterns, names, races, timestamps, a trail. You're sitting on a systemic discrimination pattern that led to financial loss and forced sales. 6 homeowners, all minorities, same tactics, same board, same woman at the centre. Mike stared, his fingers resting on a photo. Henry standing beside his bent flagpole. You really want to go after Karen Whitmore, he asked. She's on the City Beautification Council, church choir. Hell, she ran the town's 4th of July parade. Ava didn't blink. She's also been evicting black families under the radar for the better part of a decade, and I just gave you the proof. Mike was quiet for a moment. Then leave this with me. I'll call you if it's going to print. Ava gave a tight nod. As she turned to leave, Mike asked, You think this guy, Henry, knows what's coming next? She paused. I think he's always known. Karen's hands trembled as she slid the garage file cabinet closed. The missing letter, the bent flagpole, the newspaper headline. Someone was circling her now. Not just Henry. Someone smarter. Someone with access. She picked up her phone, dialed a number she hadn't used in years. Yeah, the voice answered, gruff, low. It's Karen, she whispered. I need you to check something for me, about a reporter. Her name's Ava Delaney. There was a pause. Then how deep? Karen hesitated. Deep enough to bury me. Henry pulled his truck into the Stonebrook Courthouse parking lot. Marcus sat beside him, wearing his cleanest polo shirt, back straight. Inside, Henry walked up to the records office and presented his ID. I need to request audio from the last public HOA hearing, he said. 2 weeks ago. The clerk tapped on her keyboard, then frowned. Looks like it wasn't recorded. Henry didn't flinch. They're required to record it. I understand, sir, the clerk replied, but it's not in our system. Maybe it was never submitted. Henry gave a short nod. Of course. Karen was erasing the trail. He walked out of the building slowly, Marcus trailing behind. Dad, Marcus asked, why are they doing this to us? Henry looked at his son, because sometimes people think power makes them right, and they're not used to being told otherwise. Marcus looked down. Henry added, but that doesn't mean we stop. That night, Ava received an email from an anonymous account. Subject line, you missed one. Attached was a PDF, a scan of an old wrinkled letter. Typed in blocky font, the page outlined a complaint from 2011 about excessive children's noise and unapproved lawn decorations. Filed against a family named Nwakwu. Handwritten on the bottom corner, complaint initiated by K. Whitmore. Ava stared at it. This one wasn't in the county system. This one had been buried. She cross-checked the address. That family had moved out abruptly in 2012, sold below market value. Another name, another victim. Karen's phone buzzed just past midnight. She picked it up, heart thumping. It was a text. No name, just an image, a photo of her mailbox, wide open, empty. Below it, a caption, nice try hiding the past. Karen dropped the phone. She locked every window in her house that night. The next morning, Henry stood in front of his mailbox, waiting for Miguel. When the mail truck pulled up, Miguel stepped out with a weary smile. I think this is yours, he said, handing over a small white envelope. Henry opened it on the spot. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed in clear, even font. You have the right to file a formal discrimination complaint through the Fair Housing Office. The documents you've collected are admissible, but time is running out. There was no signature, no return address, but Henry knew exactly who it was from. Someone watching, someone helping. He looked up at Miguel. Tell your friend, I got the message. That evening, Ava knocked on Henry's front door. He opened it without a word, stepping aside. She walked in holding a small audio recorder. They tried to bury the 2011 letter. It wasn't in any county file. Someone scanned it, sent it to me anonymously. Henry listened. Ava continued, We have enough. The Chronicle is printing a full exposé tomorrow. We're going public. Henry nodded slowly. Then it's time. He walked to the fireplace, reached behind the mantel and pulled out the fireproof box. Inside, letters, meeting notes, complaint copies, and his own voice. The tape recording he made. He handed it to her. Play it during the hearing. Ava blinked. You're not going? Henry looked out the window. They don't need to see me to feel me. The next morning, Karen walked into the HOA clubhouse early. She needed to control the room before Henry showed up, before Ava said a word. But as she stepped inside, she froze. There, pinned to the bulletin board, in full colour, was a blown-up scan of the 2011 letter, her signature clear, her words exposed. Below it, a printed banner in red ink. This isn't about rules, it's about who gets to stay. People were gathering behind her, reading, whispering. She backed away, her face pale, and then someone spoke behind her. A voice calm, low, steady. "You remember me, don't you?" She turned. And there he was. Not Henry. Mr. Nwachukwu. The man she drove out 13 years ago. Alive. Back. Watching her. The HOA meeting room was packed wall to wall. Neighbours who never attended it before now sat in stiff rows. Phones out. Eyes wide. Whispers spread like wildfire. The letter, Karen Whitmore's 2011 complaint, was still taped to the bulletin board, untouched. But now, others were added below it. Names, notes, evidence. Each one told a story of forced silence. Families erased not by violence, but by bureaucracy, paper trails, and subtle cruelty. And now the people were watching. Karen stood near the podium, clutching her folder. Her hands trembled. Across the room sat Ava Delaney, press badge on her coat. She had a recorder in her lap, but she wasn't even hiding it anymore. She wanted them to see. Mr. Nwachukwu sat beside his teenage daughter, his jaw clenched, his stare fixed forward. She held his hand. Henry wasn't there, but somehow he was everywhere. Karen tapped the mic. "Before we begin," she said, voice cracking, "I'd like to clarify a few things. Some of the information going around is taken out of context. There have been allegations made, some quite serious, and I just want to say, let the witnesses speak." The voice came from the back, quiet but firm. "Miguel, the mailman." Karen froze. He stepped forward, uniform neatly pressed, mailbag still slung over his shoulder like a badge of honour. "I don't usually speak at these meetings," he said. "But I've been walking this neighbourhood for 12 years. I've seen things others haven't. Letters delivered, letters taken, complaints mailed, then suddenly, homes sold, lawns stripped bare, flags gone." He paused, eyes scanning the room. "I remember Mr. Henry Lattimore's first letter of complaint, about potholes. He handwrote it. I personally handed it off, but it never got logged by the board. A month later he gets a violation notice for a flower pot. That's not a coincidence." Karen shifted. "You can't prove any of that." Miguel reached into his bag. He pulled out a stack of returned mail. Sealed, stamped. "Except these are copies of certified letters sent to the HOA that were never opened. I kept them, because I started to notice a pattern. Only certain addresses. Only certain names." Gasps filled the room. Ava stood. "I have digital copies of every violation notice from the past 5 years. And in nearly all cases, they were disproportionately issued to black and immigrant homeowners." Karen's face drained of colour. Miguel looked at her now, no fear in his voice. "And I saw you throw one of those letters in your trash bin before it ever made it to the mailbox." Silence. Thick. Tense. Final. The HOA chairwoman, who had remained uncomfortably quiet through the years, finally cleared her throat. "I think we need to suspend Karen's leadership pending formal review." Karen's mouth opened, but no words came. She looked at the crowd. They weren't with her anymore. Some were crying, some nodding, some silent, but none were with her. 2 days later, a moving truck pulled into Karen's driveway. No one waved goodbye. She didn't say a word. Her flag was gone. Her welcome mat rolled and tucked beneath her arm. She left the same way she had forced others to leave, quietly and without dignity. The Stonebrook Chronicle published the story on the front page. "Veteran fights HOA discrimination. Community exposes systemic racism." Henry read it on his porch, American flag upright again beside him, repaired by the same neighbours who once looked away. Marcus sat next to him. "Are you glad it's over?" he asked. Henry smiled faintly. "It's not over, but we took the first step, together." A few days later, a letter came in the mail. Not from the HOA, not from the paper, from Mr. Nwachukwu. It was handwritten. "Thank you for standing when no one else could. My daughter says she wants to visit again. She wants to see the house she was born in. Maybe this time we'll stay." Henry folded the letter, eyes wet. He stood, saluted the flag, then turned to his son. "Let's fix the garden, Marcus. She's coming back." Lessons learned. This wasn't just a story about a bent flag or an unfair violation. It was about dignity, how easily it can be stripped, and how powerful it is when reclaimed. It taught us that racism doesn't always wear a hood or carry a sign. Sometimes it hides in bylaws, in neighborhood rules, in what's ignored and what's enforced. We saw the quiet strength of a man who never shouted, never stooped low, but stood tall, even when pushed to the margins. We saw how silence from the powerful can harm, but silence from witnesses is even worse. But we also saw what happens when people speak, when the mailman testifies, when a daughter returns, when justice, slow and limping, finally catches up. If this story moved you, please like, comment and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Whether you've faced discrimination yourself or stood by someone who has, this is your reminder. Your voice matters. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel, Untold Touching Stories, for more real, cinematic stories of justice, truth and redemption. Because some crimes aren't about violence, they're about silence. And breaking that silence, that's where healing begins. Subscribe now. Stand with truth. Share the story.